Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of 18NTC, the Nonprofit Technology Conference from New Orleans at the Convention Center. We're sponsored by Network for Good. Each interview at 18NTC is sponsored by them, providing easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits, Network for Good. My guests are Steve Jacobs. He's managing principal at Precision Strategies. A voice crack like I'm 14. It's a strategy. It's a very dignified company. It has nothing to do with the way my voice
Happens
sounds.
to the best of us.
Thank you, Steve. I'll prompt you when it's your turn. Okay. Let me introduce you properly. And Kristina Villarini. She's the digital director at Lambda Legal. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Kristina. And your workshop topic is make them laugh, make them cry, make it rain. Kristina.
Yes.
Too much emphasis on video, and we're getting away from the lost art of written storytelling. Is that what the seminar is all about?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And we're talking about social media. We're talking about putting clients and the folks that we serve first and allowing them to share our lived experiences with our constituents. And that could take many forms depending on the medium that you work in. It could be long-form content like a blog. It could be video. There's a lot of really cool tools that are allowing folks to sort of the user-generated content sort of burst that's happening right now, where people are, walking around with devices that are capable of doing really complex things that we couldn't do 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think there's a lot of mediums that people can use to tell stories, but if you move away from that, nothing good is going to happen.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead, Steve. You want to intro yourself?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't mean yourself. I mean the topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What we were thinking about when we developed this session was just that a lot of nonprofits have trouble telling really powerful stories about the work that they do. And I think often this is the gap that you find between traditional communications directors and people like Kristina, who are digital directors. Traditional communications directors have a mindset that's very focused on delivering content that can then be translated by journalists to tell the story of the organization that they represent. And often that plays out as a press release or as a very high-level policy-focused interview, and not telling the stories of the people whose lives are affected by the nonprofit's work. So no matter what, Kristina works at Lambda Legal, which represents the LGBT community in court. Right. But regardless of whatever nonprofit organization, their mission is always going to be representing someone and someone's rights, someone's needs. And that means that there's an emotional story behind it. And if you want to marshal the support of the people who want to give you money so that you can keep doing your work, you need to give them a reason to do that. And telling them the dry statistics and wonky policy notes is not going to really spark passion in the hearts, minds, and most importantly, wallets of your supporters.
Yeah. Okay. So we want to do good storytelling, good quality storytelling. Kristina, do you ever focus on the attorneys or the paralegals as the heroes and heroines of the story rather than the clients?
Yeah, actually, Lambda is really focused on both the superstar attorneys that do the work every day. We're really fortunate to have some of the greatest civil rights lawyers on the planet doing this work every single day. And Lambda specifically is unique because a lot of the folks identify as members of the LGBT community or as like really strong allies. So this work is not just like what they are good at, it's also like mission-driven and purpose-driven for them.
Their heart. It's like in their heart.
So there was a campaign a few years ago where we did video about some of our attorneys on the staff and called them the Dream Team because it was literally folks who won marriage equality, who, Lawrence v. Texas, like these are the folks who really changed the landscape for LGBT people and people living with HIV in this country and made it possible for us to even conceive of full equality for everyone.
Yeah, I did an interview yesterday with a panel, and we talked about making staff the heroes of the story. Not obviously you focus on your clients as well, but everybody in the chain, that makes that impact, that makes that outcome so positive. focusing on them as well. So I'm good to hear that you're focusing on the dream team as well, the attorneys and and staff. Paralegals. Intake processors. Caseworkers. They're heroes too.
Yeah, Lambda is great. A lot of folks don't know that we actually have a free legal help desk, and it's tough to explain to folks who aren't familiar with the sort of impact litigation world.
Yeah,
but people will call in and ask questions like, I live in Ohio. My employer just found out that I'm HIV positive. What are my rights? Can I get fired? What does that mean? And
so now relate this back to the storytelling.
Right.
Okay, please.
So the storytelling piece is that, some people are brave enough to allow us to litigate on behalf of themselves. They're not like anonymous plaintiffs, right? So one example is Lambda Legal and Outserve SLDN are two of the firms that are representing litigants in the trans ban, the trans military ban.
Military, yeah.
Yeah. And all of our plaintiffs, the individual plaintiffs, are named plaintiffs. And each of them, I believe 3 of them are actually enlisted in the U.S. military. And that gives us a unique perspective because they're able to present what it is actually like to be a trans American soldier in a climate that is basically telling you that you are not qualified to do your job. We had Katie Schmidt, who's a staff sergeant, who's one of the plaintiffs in that case, in our office doing a Reddit AMA. And actually this week.
She was telling her story herself.
So she was able to tell her story in real time.
To live questions.
Right, to people who are not our constituents, right? Like a younger demographic, maybe mostly male, who have really strong political feelings that maybe don't jive with what we do. So those types of stories are like invaluable for us to do what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that AMA. I think I regrettably wasn't a part of it, but I was so excited to hear about it after the fact.
You were disappointed that it wasn't your idea.
Yeah,
it was so
always
good.
Every good idea is not my idea. I don't like quite as much. But what I think was so important about that was like Kristina was saying. It was reaching a new audience that is not the traditional Lambda Legal audience. Like she said, Reddit is a sort of a younger maler, whiter community.
Okay.
And by going into that space and having that plaintiff tell her story, she made herself into a human being to them instead of a type that they read sort of about.
So let's explicitly translate this into general lessons about storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good versus mediocre.
Sure. So I think the point you were making earlier about establishing heroes is very important. People like to think of themselves as the kind of person who would be a hero rather than the kind of person who would be a victim. So while it's very important for us to tell the stories of the people that we're serving and who need our help, it's really important to include the voices of the people who are doing the helping and are playing that role, because then that's sort of the avatar that the supporter can see themselves as playing when they. Sorry, I'm using video game terminology.
It's okay.
But when they donate and when they support the organization, they're not thinking of themselves as necessarily that the person who has been victimized. That's important too, of course, but they're by telling the story of that person who needs the help through the voice of the paralegal, through the voice of the lawyer, or if it's not a legal organization, someone else.
Yeah.
They think, well, that's a way I can be that sort of hero that I see when I watch TV or when I watch movies, to sort of live out that role that I want to experience in my own life.
I also just want to add that I think in this particular climate, in this era of like fake news and what's authentic and what is true, it is really, really empowering to let the person tell their own story and to give them the platform, because Lambda has a large platform. We're, a 45-year-old organization, and both our supporters and our enemies, our opposition, are looking at us and seeing what cards we're playing every single day. So it's really important to me to be able to turn over that platform to our constituents, to our plaintiffs, and let them tell why they are fighting, what is actually important to them. Like, we are a law firm. We are a civil rights law firm. Yeah. We're going to keep defending what aligns with our mission until we can't do it anymore, until we win, right? So I think with the cases that we serve, I've tried to be an advocate internally to allow us to give more of the mic to those folks.
And what other platforms or if not platforms, what other methods are you, like people turning cameras on themselves? Or,
Yeah.
what are you doing to empower the heroes?
Yeah, so the user-generated content, we'll set up we'll use like Blue Jeans and have lawyers in different offices have conversations. I've done a couple of different kinds of 5-minute, 5 questions with one of our attorneys on like Facebook that we'll post a couple of times a month, where we just break down what's happening. Like,
are you taking the questions from the people watching the live stream?
I'm taking questions usually in the comments from other posts that we've made.
Okay. So
if we see recurring themes and somebody doesn't understand, it's like, okay, I need to get this lawyer on the phone who can distill this, because most of the time they don't even know that they're speaking in the legal language, the legalese, right? It's what's comfortable for them. So part of my job is getting everybody out of their comfort zone and using different vehicles.
So you use Facebook Live?
We use Facebook Live.
Yeah.
We use Twitter.
Okay.
We love social media.
What have you done on Twitter to tell stories?
We've done a lot of joint chats with other organizations. We'll also take like user-submitted questions on those in advance.
Any hashtags you want to share?
That
people can look at?
We've done a few. I mean, when it comes to the most recent ones are on courts and judicial nominees. So like Stop FAR or No Duncan, any negative of a judge's potential nominee last name is going to be what you're looking for.
On the Twitter point, I think that there's a specific example that we cite in our session.
Well, cite it here, man.
Yes,
don't hold
absolutely.
back on nonprofit radio listeners.
The larger point that I want to make is that we can use social media to tell stories from real life, but the use of social media actually establishes its own storyline, right? And so the example that I'm thinking of is when Trump announced that he was going to ban transgender people from serving in the military, and Lambda, under Kristina's leadership, tweeted this really, really funny tweet that sort of cast Lambda as the superhero, as you were saying, where, what was the exact phrasing?
So Ariel Goldberg, my incredible, talented deputy digital director who's holding down the fort back in New York, tweeted out, puts on cape made of legal briefs.
It's like you rang.
Say it again.
Puts on, like, 2 asterisks, like an action, and said, puts on cape made of legal briefs. You rang with the quoted Hill implementation plan.
It's sort of like the bat signal going off, right? And it was, I remember, a great idea that wasn't mine, but I was very excited by. I saw this, and I just thought this is an amazing
Puts
tweet.
On cape,
And the response that we saw immediately was so strong because it was funny, right? And that's part of what our session is, right? We're talking about telling the emotional story that might make you cry, but also something that will make you laugh, because this is every nonprofit, especially Lambda Legal. If you focus too much on the problem that you're trying to fix, it gets a little too sad, it gets a little too overwhelming, and so you need to have a little bit of a sense of humor about it. And this particular tweet, and a lot of the tweets from Lambda Legal, at Lambda Legal, everyone should check it out. It brings a lot of sense of humor to the really important work that they do. And what I also thought was really, really great, I'm just bragging on your behalf here.
All right, we hold that point.
Yeah.
But what this also does is informs people about about the brand.
Totally.
The personality of Lambda Legal. We don't take ourselves so seriously that we can't invoke superheroes, in the face of gross discrimination.
Yeah.
So the brand benefits from people knowing that it's approachable. We're thinking Superman.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I'm really proud of is I kind of came from a traditional media background, so I've done like media director style work, and I've been a journalist. I worked on like celebrity beats for several years. Okay. So I have a pretty good understanding of like the sort of earned media side as well as the tech side, which is unique for digital people. But I understand that there are certain things that you have to do to engage a particular kind of persona. And like having content that is soundbitey and that a journalist can throw into a piece that is our position, and they don't have to call anybody, is really important, you know, and having, you know, that funny moment or that first moment that they're going to use. Like, we've had a GIF of the Undertaker put in like a Daily Dot piece, you know, as like, this is what Lambda Legal said about something gross that's happening, and that's like a particular phenomenon.
Did any media pick up the putting on the cape?
Yes.
Did they pick it up?
Yes.
And tweet it?
Like The Hill has run a lot of our stuff, of our stuff on social. Yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do. It's the humanity of the work that you're doing, right? Because you're really, and the sad part of it is that it's giving somebody else something to do besides for being afraid all the time.
Yeah.
Say, what do you mean? What do you mean?
So this,
I want you to hold your point, Steve. That's the one that I cut you, the one I interrupted, and now Kristina's interrupting. But it was my digression. Now she's interrupting.
We've fallen down the rabbit
hole. We'll come back to you. No, we'll get back out.
It's the wild, wild west.
It's my job to get us back out.
She's saying smart things.
We'll
Go.
Well, it's because you're reacting to the fear of whatever is in opposition of your like true value or your true mission, right? So when people saw the trans ban, they were freaking out. They were freaking out for their neighbors and their brothers and their sisters and the people that are paid to protect them, who are now having their privacy ripped out from under them. And a right that they've pretty much earned because they decided to try and protect us all over the world.
We have an all-volunteer military.
Right. So the RAND study has us quoted at somewhere between like 10 and 15,000 trans troops, like who are deployed, who are active, who are having their lives like shifted from under them. So this is real. These are real world impacts.
Real stories,
and that,
but it's getting that story.
Right, but it's also that like people saw that and trans people were scared. Trans people were scared about what this administration is doing. Are they targeting me? What does this mean? Is this legal? And we gave them, number one, we told them like, we're on it. We're watching this. And number two, we're like, you know what? Take a minute. We got this. We're going to be fine. And so I think it gave people a second to like step out of their own fear and know that there are people who are going to fight for them.
Yeah, excellent.
And so this is actually related to the point where that I was trying to say earlier. So this
I
is the perfect,
I knew it was going to be.
Perfect
that's
segue.
why I digressed us that way.
So the 2 points that Kristina was just making, and the point that you made about approachability, I'm going to tie them all together right now. So you know, any legal response organization.
I want to welcome you to Steve Jacobs' Nonprofit Radio. He's sitting in the middle. He may as well be the host. What? Garrett, just change the focus. Cut me out, or just crop me out later.
I'm ready for a career change. So, you know, any legal response organization can put out a press release saying, you know, we are going to sue, and that's something that could, you know, make a person who is concerned about this issue feel a little calmer and know that they're on it.
If they see it.
If they see it, right. So that's one issue. And secondly, even if they do see it, press releases are pretty dry, right? And so putting out a tweet along the lines of throwing on a cape made of legal briefs, it does make you feel like, okay, one, I know someone's looking out for me, and they are like me, right? Like they're like me not just because, you know, it's Lambda Legal and so it represents the LGBTQ community, but they're fun-loving, you know, not just super serious lawyer types. Yeah. And that makes them, like you said,
personality approachable.
So it makes them approachable, and not just approachable in the sense that, you know, I feel good, but people were tweeting back to them in that moment, to that particular tweet. And what I thought was particularly great, and this is what I was going to say way back when, is that they were ready to, they being Kristina and her team, were ready to tweet back to these people who were responding to them in the moment. And so people were saying, oh, I love you, and they were there to say, I love you right back. Yeah. And then people were tweeting really funny animated GIFs at them, and then they had photos ready to tweet back at them, and so it became a conversation. And so that's what I meant before when I said that the social media story is a story unto itself. It's not necessarily telling a story from the real world, IRL. And the thing is that the other social media users can become part of that story. They become characters in that story, and so they're all telling the story together, and it's a really participatory experience.
And doesn't that all contribute to long-term engagement? I mean, this opening conversation, long-term engagement.
And dollars.
How that's going to, right. I was going to say whether you can hardly ever draw the line, but whether that's going to translate to dollars, volunteers, just more sharing of your content. I mean, all those things are valuable.
Yeah, I mean, that was...
just that opening conversation.
That was a really popular, engaging, and most amplified tweet probably that month. People just went crazy for it. And we raised a lot of money that day.
That specific day you did.
That specific day we raised about $40,000. off of social media
And
alone.
That's way beyond what's typical.
Yeah, and that's
what's a typical day.
Yeah, that's legitimately like folks like, okay, who are the orgs that we're going to donate? Who's going to fight this thing? Well, it's going to be Lambda Legal because they're here.
They're on it.
So we set up a specific source link that went to a page individually from each social platform. So we had like a Facebook driving link and a Twitter driving link to our donation pages, and we were able to generate a lot of money those days.
Yeah, and didn't you say you just said now 40 grand from social, but I thought it was just 40 grand just from Twitter.
Yeah, I think it was just from Twitter.
Yeah, and it's very hard to raise money from social media. It's normally through email or through ads, and so when you can raise a lot of money through social, that means you're doing something really well.
Yeah, it was 882 donations for about 42 grand.
Okay. Any let's see, challenging stories. Things didn't go so well. Doesn't necessarily have to be at Lambda Legal.
Mm-hmm.
It could be. I mean, you seem to be willing to share, but doesn't have to be. But things that didn't. You learned a lesson. One of your clients, Steve, learned a lesson. You don't have to name them, but could have been done better. As I look back, I thought, maybe here's where I think we went a little wrong. Any tales of that? I
mean, I think that the hardest lesson that these organizations need to learn is just that it can be really hard to find these stories because like the old adage, when you're inside the picture you really can't see the frame. And so for example, an organization I used to work with several jobs ago, they were and still are, I won't name them, but a public health organization. And they had all of these really great stories about about doctors and local communities saving people's lives, and they wanted to talk about building a hospital, and that's building a hospital is important. It's access and everything, but
doctors
it's
work there,
right? Yeah, but it's not exciting, right? And so you want to hear the story about the. In fact, here's a really great example. So they didn't want to hear this from me.
They're saving lives every day.
Exactly, but to them it becomes mundane.
From cancer or a traumatic accident or something. I mean,
right.
They didn't want to tell those stories.
And so they wanted to do a campaign specifically about cancer in the developing world, because in the developing world you think about hunger, you think about AIDS, you don't think about these sort of non-communicable diseases. And they wanted to do a campaign around that, but they all wanted to talk about the stats and how, because they think it's surprising that there are so many more people, in sub-Saharan Africa suffering from cancer, and you wouldn't think about that. You think of like breast cancer as sort of a developing world issue. And so they wouldn't take my advice. I said I wanted to do a story, and finally I convinced them to do a test where one email was focused on telling just the stats the way they wanted to, and the other, they let me find someone who had a story, and it was about a dad whose daughter had cancer, and about how he didn't have access to medical help where he lived, and about all the sort of odyssey that he went on in order to just get medical help for his daughter and saved her life. Yeah. And it was mind-blowing, the difference, right? The version that told the story of a dad and his daughter, just I don't remember the exact numbers, but it blew the other one away in terms of dollars raised. And so I think that's the biggest challenge that I think a lot of nonprofits face, is just stepping outside of the frame, talking to. I think it's really important for people who work at nonprofit organizations to talk to people who don't work there and tell them about the work that they do, and see what these sort of quote unquote real people respond to and what they don't, and then also watch when their eyes glaze over, and that's how you can learn which are the stories that are worth telling. And which are sort of the supporting facts that you throw in later on.
We still have a couple minutes left together, like two and a half. So what else do you want to share about storytelling, good, bad, empowering the volunteers and heroes within to tell their own? What else can we?
I mean, it's a slow burn. I think you kind of have to be in it for the long haul. Not everything is going to raise $40,000 in a day. And sometimes it's going to take a minute. You have to continue with the touch points that are important to the message and to yourself, because your constituents may not necessarily get it at first. We have some folks at Lambda Legal who are like, well, I don't really understand the trans bathroom thing. Like that's not really our issue. I don't really understand it. And it's coming obviously from a position of privilege and never having that experience, but it's also coming from a fact of like, it's access, it's experience, it's, how you present. And if you've never had that experience where somebody like stopped you from walking into a restroom or misgendered you, or if you've never had to live with that, it's easy to not get it. So for us, it's an important issue, and we're going to keep fighting for it. But our constituents, some of them don't get it. And that doesn't stop us from continuing to tell those stories, from continuing to advocate for like Gavin Grimm and other folks who are really trying to make that access fair and equitable and safe for everyone.
All right, it's a long haul, but it's worth...
Stay true to it.
It's worth telling stories,
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I would add there, understanding that we're running low on time, is just that I think that one of the reasons we wanted to do this session was because there's a very strong trend, particularly in digital fundraising right now, to focus on minimal, like these like tiny little tactics that have been proven to raise the needle a little bit. But the more and more you take those sort of testing optimizations where you're just changing the language a little bit, or you're using a certain kind of graphic or a certain kind of like urgency approach, the more you start to mistreat your community of supporters and treat them more like ATMs rather than people.
And how much can you do that anyway? I mean,
right?
Every post can't be groundbreaking and red bold colors.
Right, but if you're on some email list, that's what you're getting.
Everybody's going to be exhausted and turn you off. All right, we got to leave it there. The other reason you did your session is because you knew you'd be on Nonprofit Radio. see here, Tony Martignetti, Nonprofit Radio. It's right behind you. It's bona fide. It's on the banner. It's in print. It has to be true. Okay, they are Steve Jacobs. He's the managing principal at Precision Strategies, and Kristina Villarini. She's digital director at Lambda Legal. Steve and Kristina, thank you so much. Really,
thank you.
Thanks a lot. This interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. And you are with Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of 18NTC. Thanks so much for being with us.